Hello everyone, welcome again to another Booze Baron. No bullshit, straight to the social media sphere style Thunderdome video. Here we go. Today's topic is whiskey. Can you see that? Lights in the way? Whiskey. My favourite spirit. This is the thing that kind of got me going from, oh yeah, I like to go to bars to screw it. I'm opening my own, I'm going to sell alcohol, I'm going to do everything about it. I'm going to travel through Scotland, visiting every bloody distillery you can get me near. Don't know why. Something in it just spoke to me. But the funny thing is, a lot of people tend to go out and, you know, I'm hanging out with them, they'll sort of say, I really hate whiskey. But then they'll order a bourbon and coke, and they don't listen when I sort of explain bourbon's a type of whiskey. Or, you know, they really hate scotch, but then you give them a single malt and they really enjoy it. And I just want to break down what the hell whiskey is. Like, you know, just this is what the whole thing is. And then we'll go into the different kind of groups later on. Just straightforward, here we go. This is whiskey. All right, whiskey, one. Once again, we've got good lighting issues. Hey, there we go. Number one, the first thing that makes whiskey whiskey is it's made from grains. That means barley, corn, wheat, you get the idea. Rye is a big one too, but grains. If you take grains and you sort of get the enzymes going so they start to turn to sugar or create sugars, then you kind of smash some water in and add some yeast, bam, you've got pretty much cheap, crappy beer. From that, which you leave to ferment to get to a certain point, you then distill to get what's sort of known, well, depending on the spirits, we'll get into that side of stuff later, that's way more kind of like down the line, but the point is you distill once, twice, 3 times, 4, 5, however many times you want to distill to get the actual spirit. This spirit is called new make, and that right there is what it looks like. Look familiar? Most vodkas out there are actually made from grain. Most gins come from grain. So, right there, that's pretty much an unfiltered, straightforward vodka. Dead easy. What then happens is the second step to make a whiskey, because at this point, it's not a whiskey yet. It's new make, it's white dog, it's all these other names, but it's not whiskey. Step number 2, aged in oak. That's it. There is a certain amount of time from the different sort of regions for how long it has to be aged to be called whiskey. Scotland's 3 years, most of America's 2 years, except for Tennessee, that's 1. Australia, I believe, is 2 years at the moment. Most countries are sort of around the 2 to 3 mark, and, you know, it makes sense. It all came about from back in the day during the gin craze. The English government didn't really want people. By the way, we are talking, 18th century at the moment. The English government didn't want people going crazy on whiskey if they were allowed to sort of drink and get all messed up. So they went, well, okay, you have to put it in oak. You have to shove it in a barrel, and it has to be there for at least 3 years. So that way it reduces in alcohol content a little bit, you lose some of it, they can tax more, all the rest of it. It worked out as a big win-win for the government. Everyone else was sort of, you know, they didn't get to really enjoy getting pissed as much, but at the same time, something truly beautiful came out of it. Anyway, next topic. Right. From those two things, as it ages in the barrel, you get something that looks a bit more like this. This is actually the exact same spirit you see here from the same distillery, just 18 months on. Not yet a whiskey, not in Australia. It's an Australian whiskey, by the way. Or will be when it's old enough. At the moment, it's just, you know, little baby whiskey. Or not even whiskey. At that point, there's not really a proper name for it yet. No one's come up for a rested whiskey. It's not like tequila, which has the Blanco. This would be a Reposado, and then finally, I'll show you the fully aged whiskey in a second, which would be like an Añejo. Although that's not quite the same. I'll talk about tequila another day. For now, whiskey. So, it's aged. It's getting onto that sort of a colour, which is really light, straw-coloured, nice, golden, looking a little bit more familiar. Then, from that, we move on to, there. See that rich amber colour, the way it kind of holds onto the glass, that little bit of red. This is actually a single malt from the Dalmore in Scotland. a small portion of it's been aged in Cabernet Sauvignon barrels, which will kind of be the main reason behind that little red tinge. But you see how much colour change there is between these three, right? So you start off totally clear, a little bit strawy, goldeny coloured, right there. Beautiful, rich amber, all those hues that are just, you know, synonymous with whiskey. So when you think about it, if you like certain types of vodka, especially Polish vodkas, you'll actually probably like whiskey, even though you might think you don't like it because you've tried certain whiskies that aren't, you know, a pure straight grain. So give it a think, have a look at it. Anyway, let's talk about how many types of whiskey there are. There are so many, I'm not going to name them all, but let's break them down into the 5 most common. Scotch, of course, right? That comes in single malt and blended. We talked about that the other day with the how to drink Scotch thing. American whiskies. Now that covers your Tennessee, covers your bourbon, it covers a whole bunch of small batch whiskies that are coming out at the moment, American rye whiskies, all that. It's hard to call it anything, sorry, truck going fast, anything but American, mainly because you'll sort of tick off certain people depending on what you name it. Tennessee people say that their stuff isn't bourbon, although technically the definition of bourbon is it's whiskey made in America, that's it. So Tennessee whiskey, technically it's bourbon. At the same time, you can't, like, you know, it's filtered through sugar, maple, ash, and all the rest of it, so it's slightly different. So let them call it what they like. The point is, it's American whiskey. Done. Rye whiskey. Rye whiskey is any whiskey that has been distilled from this. Rye. See that Belgrove, Australia? That one right there? White rye. That's it in its new make form, but the point is it comes from the rye grain rather than from barley like most whiskies, or, in the case of a lot of American whiskies, corn. So, we then move on to single malts. Single malts come from all over the world. The difference between single malt and blended is really simple. Single malts come from one distillery. That's it. It's not one expression of one malt in a vintage style or anything like that. It's not like that. It's from one distillery. So in that distillery, they will often, for their year's release, like 18-year-old, they will blend a whole bunch of spirits where the youngest part is 18 years old to make it all taste like the same 18-year-old the year before and the year before and the year before. But it's called a single malt because it's one distillery's malt. That's it. It is technically blended, but it's not a blended whiskey because it's all malt, which means it's all barley, and not blended with grain or with malts from other distilleries. Cool, cleared that up, awesome. And then, other. Other's kind of a difficult one, but you are looking at stuff like corn whiskey, you're looking at stuff like straight grain whiskey, and there are a couple of commercial availabilities. I mean, you're looking at blended whiskies from different countries, like Australia has some weird blended whiskies, India has some really cool whiskies, single malt and blended. Japan has some amazing single malts going on at the moment. But you'll get stuff like, I know China's trying to sort of convince the world that they have a rice whiskey, and that's kind of fun. I can't wait to see if it really gets classified as a whiskey over here or not. But anyway, that's it. Others are just all the little things that don't quite totally fit in with one particular style. Right, so there we go. Let's do the quick run through. Whiskey is distilled from grain, and then it's aged in oak. Dead easy. And there are 5 main distinguishing styles, which are Scotch, American, rye, single malt, and other. Before I get a little comment about how rye is technically American whiskey, it's not. It's the most common component in Canadian whiskey, and was once the most common American whiskey, or at least the most desired American whiskey. Prohibition knocked it out, and so whilst it's making a comeback at the moment and has been used in blends for quite a while, you can't technically stick it under American whiskey because it's always been a Canadian thing and it's being distilled everywhere in the world at the moment. Just like how I can't really go and put the Welsh in under Scotch. Anyway, that's it. Thanks for me. Thanks to you. That's it from me. I will see you guys soon, and yeah, let me know if you sort of prefer the whole me bending down, squatting behind the bar scene, or actually chilling out at a table, because the table was a bit easier. This, I don't know, I kind of like it a bit more, but it's up to you guys. Let me know what you think. Love your stuff. I'll see you all soon.